Stacy, you want to take it away?
Yeah, this is going to be a real short theme song, short and hot.
It's the Showrunner Show, bitches. You know it.
Wow.
Short and hot. That was the right description.
Short and hot, yeah. Welcome to the Showrunner Show, where every week we demystify some aspect of the job of showrunning for anyone who works in TV, who wants to work in TV, or just wants to know how it's all made. Today, just like last week, we're trying something a little different. We're calling this series our kind of best practices series. These are the tips or tricks that we've used on our shows that have been transformative in our processes, and we found it very helpful. Feel free to use these, don't, but let us know how you like them.
This is the secret recipe, people. You're getting a glimpse at our Colonel Sanders herbs and spices.
Yeah. Well, today's best practice we wanted to discuss is the 10-hour workday. The idea of most shows, you know, they say they've scheduled a 12-hour workday, but really they've budgeted for 12 plus 2, you know, for overtime. And Drew and I, you know, realized, you know, in coming up directing and stuff, that as, you know, we make our days over and over, we tend to be very punctual and very on time and on budget. And on the second half of it, like, we would ask for the big things we want, you know, financially, you know, crane days or whatever. We'd wait for the second half of shooting because, you know, we make enough 12-hour days in our shoots. The second half of the day, there's all this overtime they budgeted that they haven't used, and suddenly there's a, you know, extra $1 million sitting around, and you can kind of get whatever you want in the second half.
Second half of the shoot.
Yeah. Second half of the shoot. And then we shot a thing in Paris. We were lucky enough to do a movie in Paris, and they have, like, by law, you can only shoot 10 hours a day, which, you know, only in film is a 10-hour day, like, you know, a light load.
They also have a state holiday about once every 3 or 4 days.
Yeah,
which is nice.
which is amazing.
Yeah. And they also have a union. The union forces you to give everyone a glass of wine at lunch every day, which is amazing.
I thought it was 2 glasses. Is it 1 glass of wine?
One glass. But the Americans were unable to control themselves. They'd end up, like, the American actors ended up, you know, a number of them ended up pretty saucy after lunch. So we had to ask the French to please let us not do this because the Americans aren't responsible enough to handle it.
We didn't kill it for the French crew. We just had to kill it for the actors.
Yeah,
exactly.
Drunk actors is not a good recipe for speed in the second half of the day. That's for sure.
Yeah, so we were in France and we were doing these 10-hour days, and you're not allowed, there's no overtime. They're you know, that's just not an option. They're like, you know, in France, you know, we work to live. We don't live to work like you Americans. You know, they would say that a lot. And the thing is, because they were 10-hour days and they were, you know, limited hours in the day that you could shoot, we had to just add an extra week to the schedule. And so instead of a 5-week shoot, it became a 6-week shoot. But what happened at the end of the shoot, like, I was used to, like, with our previous movies, by the end of a shoot, you feel like you've just been run over by a truck. Like, you know, you've had a cold and the flu, and you've, you know, haven't slept, and, you know, you have big bags under your eyes, and you're, you know, 20 pounds heavier than when you started, and, you know, like, you just look like hell. Whereas at the end of that shoot, I felt fit and rested and healthy. I didn't have the same brain fog that I had on other shoots, that by, you know, in most movies, day one, you're just, like, you know, full of ideas, and, you know, by the end of it, you're just, like, limping. And in that shoot, we felt great at the end of it. And it was like one of these, like, why can't we do this in America? Why can't we try this? And we asked kind of line producers over and over as we came back and did more projects, why can't we do 10-hour days? And they're like, oh, actually, you know, it costs benefit. Like, if you applied that overtime to extra days, it would net out. It wouldn't even cost more to do 10-hour days and add extra days to the schedule. That wouldn't even cost more. But, you know, you'd have to get buy-in from the studios, and nobody wants to do it. And we're like, but why? And then we had on season 2 of Joe Pickett. So season 1 of Joe Pickett, there was these days where it was like these long days, and everyone's been shooting. It's now 4 a.m, and everyone's driving home in the pitch dark in the middle of nowhere. And I found myself like driving home, and it was dangerous. I could feel it was dangerous. I was struggling to stay awake. I was nodding off in my car. I was, having a hard time getting home safely and like, rolling down the window, slapping myself, that kind of thing. And then I was like, there's 200 other people doing the exact same thing I'm doing right now. Like, what are the chances that
Every day.
And what are the chances all 200 of those are going to get home safely every single day? And Michael Dorman, our lead on Joe Pickett, and Drew and I and Linda Ambry, we said like, okay, for season 2, how do we restructure this in a way that would allow us to keep people safe? And we thought through a lot of ideas, and finally we're like, let's do the 10-hour day. We'll add an extra week or 2 to the end of the schedule, and let's do a 10-hour day.
And how do you not kill your lead too? On a show like Joe Pickett, Michael Dorman, that was a 96-day shoot in season 1. And I bet Michael Dorman shot 85 of those days. It was that kind of level where, when you have a show where you have an actor or 2 that are basically in almost every scene, like it's just brutal to be shooting 5 days a week, 12 hours a day, that often go into overtime. So it's often more than that. And I just want to circle back too to the kind of the French mentality a little bit of, living to work versus working to live. And there's truth to that. I think beyond what you're saying, John, as far as like ending a show and being so physically beat up and just, you also typically don't get to see your family at all, never have dinner with them. You come home after they've gone to bed and you're gone before they wake up. And that goes on for months, And so, I always find like after a show wraps, like just the kind of repairing you need to do on the home front is pretty real. And I think that's true for all people. And that Paris experience is like, we were having dinner together every night. We were, going out with some of the actors, having dinner with them. I mean, it allowed for just that, 2-hour difference really allowed life to continue during production, where it doesn't like everything's not put on hold until after you wrap. And then you spend a month after you wrap kind of, putting all the pieces back together of your life. It just really allowed for a continuity of family and life in a way that was really eye-opening.
The 10-hour days gives time to be a human being at the end of it. Like you look at, like, let's say you're scheduling 14-hour days and, a day goes a little long, or 12-hour days, day goes a little long, it becomes 14, even 15, takes an hour to drive home, maybe an hour to go to sleep. That's 16, 17, then an hour to wake up and get ready. That's 18, an hour to drive back to set. That's 19. That's 3 hours of sleep. And then you're preparing, like, when do you prepare? Like, when do you go through the script? When do actors memorize their lines? Like, there's no time. It just squeezes everything out. And by slowing things down a little bit, there's a little time to discuss things. There's a little time to think about things for an actor to go home, spend an hour memorizing their lines and then go to bed versus, trying to do it in the shower in the morning. You know what I mean? Like, it just...
You said an hour, but for the leads, I think it's often 2 or 3 hours. I know some of the leads I've talked to, I don't want to name names because it's too personal, but they were like, have a good night, have fun. Like, I got to go home and work for 3 hours,
Yeah.
But that's a typical.
Yeah.
For crew members, directors and actors, that's one thing. They go into a project, they go out of a project. But say you are like the boom operator or something like that, something where your whole job is production, not pre-production, not post-production, production. That's your life all the time. I mean, I wonder what divorce rates are like among
It's true.
crews. It's pretty
brutal.
high.
Yeah, it's brutal. And I will say too, like the 10-hour day, I think if you're doing 12 every day and always slipping a half hour into overtime here and there, there's a certain mentality that kind of is pervasive in the crew of like, we're going to be here for 12 hours no matter what we do. So we kind of move at whatever pace we kind of feel like, and you're not maybe getting the fastest version of your crew if they know they're going to be there that amount of time every day. And then, honestly, getting into overtime a little bit is good money. So that's not bad either. But if you're on a 10-hour day, and then, you often wrap in 9.5 or 9 hours, and the crew could every day start to sniff that we might get out of here early. everyone just hauls ass. Like we found ourselves on Waco season 2, like having days where we wrapped in 7 hours. There's days that we wrapped at lunch because the crew was just hauling ass because they knew we had a track record of of not doing 12-hour days, and everything just moves so much faster. And we're shooting the same amount of pages that a 12-hour schedule would allow, and the same amount of everything. But it's just like suddenly everything just was on like rollerblades. It was just great.
It was. Yeah, it'd be like 10 a.m. and we'd be like, what can we pull forward? We'd be like, what can we pull forward? What are we supposed to shoot downfield? Like, what could we shoot here today, right now? And it became this game for the crew of like, ooh, like we're going to get so far ahead of it that we're pulling things from later in the schedule up. And I don't know, that was, that really, infuses the set with an energy that you really, you can't get and sustain for 12 to 14 hours a day, every day.
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys, because it sounds like that's you as directors, which is one of the things you guys are able to do that's so cool is write the stuff, direct the stuff, produce the stuff. But what about you as showrunners? Say, let's pretend it's all guest directors, which obviously we've had some episodic directors on projects. How do you communicate this to them? How do you find that they execute it? Do they also have the experience of like, oh my God, we planned for a 10-hour day, but we ended up with an 8-hour day? Or is it more that it rolls toward that 11 or 12 often, but never dips into the 13, 14? Like, what's your experience?
I mean, I think some of it is from the show running standpoint, like you have to be willing to support if you want the 10-hour days, you have to support your guest directors. And the guest directors will often be like, I don't know that I can make this day. It's up to you to look at it and see, like, I think it's a makeable day, or let's take, I don't know, one location out of the day. Let's take one character out of the day so there's less angles to shoot, or, something like to simplify it to a point that other directors can do it. I think it's important.
I will say, too, with the guest directors, it really, totally depends on the director. But I think a lot of guest directors want to be cautious, and they want to get a lot of takes of everything, and they want to get all the coverage because they want to make us happy in the studio and the network happy, and make sure that we're not sitting in post and why didn't you get this shot or that shot or this coverage. For us, it's kind of relieving them of that pressure a little bit, that we don't like to hose things down and get 10 takes from every size, and and you can move faster than that. You don't need to get that many takes. You don't need there might be a piece of coverage you just know you won't use, and you tell them that, like, just don't spend the time with that whole setup because we won't use it, and we're covered here. And I think that's for guest directors, I think that's usually the issue is they tend to go longer because they're not the ones, responsible for the final cut, and they want to make sure we have everything we need, so they're doing it for us, but we often don't need that much. They do their 4-day cut and then they're gone, and they just don't want to, us to be sitting there with all the footage being like, oh, why didn't you get this or why didn't you get that? And, so if you can communicate that in real time of what you do and don't need, and if you feel like you have a scene from us, on that setup, you don't, need to get more takes unless the director's looking for something very specific they didn't get. I think it's always helpful to be around and be like, hey, we're good. You can move on, and just, giving them permission to move that fast. And I think a guest director would be like, oh my God, if I wrap 2 hours early, what are they going to say? And are they going to think, and then they don't have something that they need, then it's on me. There's a lot of that kind of game. And I think it's helpful to be really communicative with your directors to let them know, what you do and don't need, and that you won't, come back and be super pissed if if there's something that you wish you had that you don't have, that you're not going to blame them, and that it's more important to keep things moving and keep the spirits high and keep everyone rested and all those things, all the upsides of shooting shorter days.
We should do a whole best practices, or even 2, about coverage at some point, because that is, at least as the covering writer, that whole question of like, oh God, the script says this. Are they going to get that shot of the person being surprised? Or are they going to get that shot of, the insert shot or the reaction shot? Like, you spend so much time going like, when am I going to creep up to the director and be like, excuse me, Anyway. I would love to. Let's dig into that at some point.
Well, and I think too, like to Drew's point, like part of the reason we're, when we're directing our own stuff, we're able to move very fast is because we know what we are or aren't going to use. And as a guest director, you don't have that Like there's certain kinds of shots that I know Drew doesn't like, Drew knows I don't like, or, you know, I know Drew loves a car kicking up dust in the background. Drew loves that shot. Like if there's an option to do that, you know, Drew will be happy every day. And, you know, we both have things like that we know there's certain ways we do like to approach things where guest directors don't necessarily know how a showrunner or how a production likes doing it, even if they've watched the other episodes. And so they do have to, you know, overcover it. And one of the things we try to say in the tone meeting is to really talk about, like, we really want to see this, you know, this scene is about this actor. Let's make sure that actor, you know, we have a, you know, reaction shot, like, and to lay out the things that are really important to us in scenes so that everything's not important. It's just, you know, where, you know, true north is on a scene. And then to give the guest directors permission, like we try to give permission to people, like, look, you have the right to make a mistake. You have the right to miss a piece of coverage or to make, you know, decisions on the fly where you're like, hey, this is more important than that. Like the, you know, horses walking through the woods is less important than this emotional scene between these characters. I'm going to spend more time on this, less time on that. You have the right to do that. And we won't, you know, after the fact, second guess you. And like, we know what it's been, you know, we've been in a situation where we have a famous director, you know, standing over our shoulder, like, why didn't you shoot it this way? Why didn't you shoot it that way? And, you know, I'm not, you know, saying we're famous, you know, but we've been in that spot, and it's hard when someone's second guessing you. And we try to, as much as we can, empower the guest directors on our shows to direct and to make decisions as they see. Like, we've hired them for their judgment in part, and for their creativity and their judgment. And we have to trust that judgment to some extent, and to let them know we will trust that judgment and not be like, dude, you didn't get a, you know, close up of the, you know, the hand picking up the water bottle in the middle. Like, what the hell? You know, we won't be those guys. And we can always mop something like that up downfield anyway. You know what I mean?
You guys always have a day or two at the end where it's all the inserts and all the little things. Those are fun. Those are fun, weird days. As an observer, I want to point out a couple of things that I noticed that you guys do that are good time savers. These might be good tips for other showrunners or for other directors. One thing I've noticed is that you guys do often do 3 takes of something, and if you've got it, you move on. You know, there are some people, I've worked with some directors where they're going to do 9 or 10 takes every time. And by take 8, 9, or 10, like literally nothing has changed. The camera setup's the same. The block's the same. It's like, what magical thing are you expecting the angel to descend?
I know. And then you do
like,
cover it. And then you do a different piece of
on
coverage, and you do those same lines 10 more times. And then you do another setup and you do the same lines 10 more times. Like,
and then by the time you move on to the second scene of the day, everybody just looks like they got dirt in their mouth. It's just like, this. So to do, if you got 3 and you got it, it's okay to move on. Nobody's going to fault you for moving on after 3.
I would love to just make the point too that it's not an easy sell. Okay, so if you are a showrunner and you want to convince the studio and network to do 10-hour days across the board, you'll be faced with a lot of resistance to that idea. And I think in their mind, the logic is, okay, if we have 5 blocks, 2 episodes per block, 10-hour days, we'll add a shooting day to each block. So that's 5 extra shooting days. Maybe it goes from, 90 days to 95 days. And, shooting days can be somewhere in the neighborhood of, $200,000. So 5 extra days, that's an extra $1 million that we don't have, What is really useful is to have your line producer do the analysis and actually show them that it will not only is it a wash, but it's actually a money saver to add those 5 days and shoot 10-hour days, and bank all those hours that you're not working on. A lot of your crew are hourly employees. And if you're not hitting overtime ever, which is much more expensive hours than regular hours, if you can show that if you, really stick to the 10-hour days and aren't going into overtime, that adding 5 extra days is actually a lot cheaper. And we did that and showed that, in spades. And I think it really proved to be true. And we actually, in that season 2 of Joe Pickett, where we got the 10-hour days, we actually also added a week off in the middle of production, which was also something that the studio resisted heavily. But, kind of saying just everyone's so beat up. 100 days is a lot of days to shoot. And and our lead actor works all of them. So let's just give everybody a week off in the middle. And it was the best thing ever. Everyone took a vacation. A lot of people went home. Everyone came back totally refreshed. And then we had, the last 40 days and everyone just was like, it was like they're starting a new show. And it was, I think it probably saved millions of dollars, honestly, doing it that way.
How much more is overtime?
I think it's time and a half for those extra 2 hours and then double time. And then it goes into triple time. It gets crazy.
Yeah. It's like for 2 hours is time and a half and then double time. And so crews can get exhausted doing it. But, a lot of crew members, a few of those days, here and there are really good for the paycheck. So they don't hate it, but they also hate it. They don't, but they do.
Yeah. That's how you buy your speedboat. But when will you be able to use that speedboat?
Your wave runner.
Totally. So generally, so the 10-hour workday, you get the best out of people. You have people showing up rested and able to think and function. There's less drama because people are less exhausted. There's less accidents and mistakes, because people are not exhausted. People are more prepared. You have better scripts because you have time to develop things a little more. And it ends up being cheaper too.
I have one to add to that. If you're competing with other shows, if you're in a town like Calgary or Santa Fe, if you're in a town with multiple shows going on and crews, your script supervisor and your sound mixer and all that, and they have a choice of which show they want to join, in future seasons, they're probably going to like your show more if it's more human. You know what I mean? It builds loyalty, and then you can, what's the word? When you keep employees? Retention. You can retain the best of the best, which is nice.
It's true. Which is huge. That's half the battle is getting the best, sound mixer in an area or the best boom. If you're known as a production that treats everyone, with compassion and kindness and equally, there's not that hierarchy that, exists on other shows. There's everyone's human, and there's time to be a human. I think that goes a long way.
It does. I got to say, your speedboat joke reminded me of something too about double time. John and I once worked with a sound mixer who had done the movie Armageddon with Michael Bay.
So funny. I love this
and he was
line.
talking about working 20-hour days for the whole sound mix. We're like, wow, did you hate that? Was that just the worst? He said, no, I loved it. I just said, Armageddon a Ferrari.
It was Armageddon. Armageddon a Ferrari.
Armageddon a Ferrari.
So good.
So good.
Yeah. Well, please send us a message. Tell us if you like these best practice episodes, and please hit subscribe. And if you like our show, please consider rating us. Thank you.
Oh, and you can recommend it to other people too.
Oh, yeah, please do.
Bye.